Hello there friends, it's Ashley here from the Loopy Lamb and theloopylamb.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable crochet Christmas doll dress. This pattern has two parts to it. We have the dress and the shawl, and these are weeks 26 and 27, the final weeks of our 2022 Amigurumi Advent Calendar Crochet Along. Stay tuned to the end of the video to find out how you can possibly win one of two prize packs that I'm giving away to participants of the Amigurumi Advent Calendar Crochet Along. And if you want to be part of next year's Crochet Along, we will be doing a boy doll and all of their clothes and accessories for our next Advent Calendar Crochet Along. So make sure that you sign up to my newsletter for all updates on that and when it will be releasing. And I've included a link to that in the description box below for you. To start our crochet Christmas doll dress, we're going to be using the main color of our dress to start. So for me, the main color of my dress will be the blue color, and we're going to create a slip knot to start. So we're going to hold on to our yarn tail here, and then we're going to wrap it around our first two fingers, and then we're going to create an X by crossing the yarn over itself. And then we're going to turn our hand and use our ring finger to pin that yarn in place. So we have two strands of yarn on our fingers. Then we're going to take our crochet hook and we're going to insert it under the first strand and pick up the second strand. So we're going over that second strand and pulling it under the first with our crochet hook. Then as we're pulling this underneath, we're going to transfer all of the yarn off of our fingers. You're just going to gently slip your fingers out of that and transfer it all onto the hook. Then pull both strands of the yarn to tighten up the yarn and the knot to the hook. We want to have some fluidity of movement here. You don't want to pull it so tight that it's stuck in the same spot. If you do have that, you want to kind of just pull the loop on your hook up a little bit until you have a little bit more space there and you can move it freely. And now we're ready to get started. You're going to need to start by creating a chain of 36. To do that, we're going to yarn over hook and pull through the loop that's on our hook to create our first chain. Then we're going to do that again. We're going to yarn over and pull through the loop on our hook, and that's our second chain. We're going to continue to do this until we have 36 chains. So I'll continue on and show you what we're going to continue on. So yarning over and pulling through. That's 3, yarn over and pull through, and that's 4. So I'm going to finish my chain of 36 and I'll meet you back here as soon as I've got 36 chains. So now that we have our chain 36 completed, we're ready to move on to row 1. Row 1 will start by placing a single crochet in the 7th chain from the hook. So when you're counting chains, you never count the yarn on your hook as a chain. We're going to start in this chain right here. So we're going to count over 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then we're going to insert our hook into that 7th chain. And then we're going to yarn over hook and pull up a loop. So you should have 2 loops on your hook at this point. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through both of those loops on our hook. And that is your first single crochet. Now you'll notice that we have a little loop here created by skipping those chains, and that's going to later become a buttonhole on our dress. So we're not going to be working into that ever. That's just going to hang out there all on its own to be a buttonhole later. So now we're going to move on and we're going to place 1 single crochet into each of our remaining chains across. And I'll show you the single crochet again. We're going to insert our hook into the very next chain, yarn over, and pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook, and that's your single crochet completed. And we're going to do this all the way across our chain. So we'll do this one more time. Insert our hook into the chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. Should have 2 loops on your hook. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. And that's your 3rd single crochet. So if you'd like to pause your video and work 1 single crochet into each remaining chain across, I'll meet you back here at the end of the row and show you how we're going to move on to row 2. So I just did my last stitch of row 1, and at this point you should have 30 single crochet stitches and that little chain 6 loop that we created at the beginning. To move on to row 2, we're going to need to do what's called a chain 1 and turn. To do a chain 1, we're going to yarn over hook and pull the yarn through the loop on our hook, and that's your chain 1. And we're going to turn our work, and we're ready to move on to row 2. For row 2, we're going to place 1 single crochet into each of the first 2 stitches. So we're going to work into this first stitch here, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2. And that's your single crochet. And we're going to repeat that into the next stitch. So we have 2 single crochets. And in this next stitch here, we're going to do a single crochet increase. Now, a single crochet increase means that you're going to work 2 single crochet stitches into the same stitch. And I'll show you that here. Into this next stitch, we're going to single crochet once, and go back into that same stitch and single crochet a second time. And now you've completed a single crochet increase. For the rest of this row, we have what's called a pattern repeat. And for that repeat, we're going to be doing 4 single crochet stitches, or 1 single crochet stitch in each of the next 4 stitches, followed by an increase stitch. All right, we need to do that 5 times across our row. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. So we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So there's 1, 3, and 4. Now that we have our 4 single crochets, we are now at the point where we have to do a single crochet increase into the next stitch. And again, that's those 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch. So we've done that 1 time, and now we have to do it 4 more times in order to complete our repeat. So we're going to do 4 single crochets followed by an increase again. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4, followed by an increase into the next stitch. So now we've done that now 2 times, so we have to do it 3 more times. So if you'd like to pause your video and repeat 4 single crochets followed by an increase until you have 2 stitches left to be worked, I'll meet you back here when we get to those 2 stitches and show you what we need to do next. So I just finished my repeat of 4 single crochets followed by an increase, and now I have 2 stitches left in this row needing to be worked. Now we're going to place 1 single crochet into each of those last 2 stitches. So there's 1 and 2. We're not going to be working into that chain 6 space because again, that's just going to be a buttonhole, and we're not going to be working into that. At the end of this row, you should have 36 single crochets. And now we're ready to move on to row 3. To do that, we're going to yarn over and chain up 1, and we're going to turn our work. In this row, we're going to create some armholes for our doll. But first, we're going to need to do 4 single crochets, 1 in each of the first 4 stitches. So we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the first 4 stitches. So there's 2 and 4. And now we're ready to start our armhole. To create our armhole, we're going to need to do a chain of 8. So this is done very similarly to the same as we created our foundation chain. We're just going to yarn over and pull through the loop. So there's 1, and we're going to continue to do this until we have 8 chains. 2, 5. So now that I have 8 chains, I'm going to skip 10 stitches in this row. So I'm going to start counting in the first stitch here that is unworked. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now our next stitch is going to be worked into the 11th stitch. When you skip 10 stitches, that means you work into the next stitch after you've skipped 10. So now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. So here's our first single crochet, and now we're going to work 7 more. So now that we have our 8 single crochet stitches, we're ready to create our second armhole. And to do that, we're going to chain 8 because that's what we did on the first side and we want our armholes to be even. So we're going to yarn over and pull through the loop. That's 1, and we're going to continue until we have 8. Now that we have our chain of 8, we're going to count over 10 stitches because we need to skip 10 stitches to create our armhole. So starting in the first unworked stitch here, we're going to count over 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I'm putting my finger on my 11th stitch here because that's where we're going to work our first stitch. And we're going to place 1 single crochet into that 11th stitch. And now we'll place 1 single crochet into each of the remaining 3 stitches. At the end of this row, you should have 16 single crochets and these 2 chain 8 spaces. And now we're ready to move on to row 4. Before we do row 4, we're going to yarn over and chain up 1 and turn our work. And for row 4, we're going to start by placing 1 single crochet into each of the first 3 stitches. So there's 1, 2, and 3. In our next stitch here, we're going to work a single crochet increase. And again, that's 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch. Now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of these chains that we use to create our armhole. So we have 8 chains, so we should have 8 single crochets. All right, so now that I've worked 1 stitch into each of my chains across, I'm going to work an increase stitch or an increase into the next stitch. So that, again, that's those 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch. And then we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. There's 3. And 6. And now we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch here. So there's my 2 single crochets into the next stitch. And now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of these chains. And again, we've got 8 chains, so we want to make sure that we're adding 8 single crochets. Now it's really easy to pick up or lose stitches when crocheting into the chains for the armholes. I'm finding, especially some of the testers had noted that they were having that issue. So I always recommend that after you've done this and you've worked into the chains, taking a moment at the end of the row to double check your stitch count can help make sure that you don't run into any issues in subsequent rows. At the end of this row, you should have 36 single crochets. So just take a moment at the end and count your stitches. Now we should have 4 stitches left to be worked, and we're going to work a single crochet increase into that first stitch. And then we're going to place 1 single crochet into each of the remaining 3 stitches. And again, at the end of this row, you should have 36 single crochets. And now we're ready to move on to row 5. To do that, we're going to chain up 1 and turn our work. And for row 5, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch across. So if you'd like to pause your video and do 1 single crochet into each stitch across, I'll meet you at the end of row 5 here and showing you how to move on to row 6. So I just finished my last stitch of row 5 and I'm ready to move on to row 6. I'm going to chain up 1 and turn my work, and I'm ready to do my first stitches of row 6. For row 6, we have a pattern repeat of 5 single crochets followed by a single crochet increase, and we need to repeat that a total of 6 times. To do that, we're going to place 1 single crochet into each of the first 5 stitches. Now that I have my 5 single crochets, I'm going to place a single crochet increase into the next stitch. So that is our first repeat, and now we need to do that 5 more times. And I'll show you how to do that one more time. We'll 1 single crochet into each of the first 5 stitches. There's 2, 4, and 5. And then in the next stitch here, we'll do a single crochet increase. So we need to repeat that 4 more times. And at the end of this row, we should have 42 stitches. So if you'd like to pause your video and repeat 5 single crochets followed by a single crochet increase until the end of the row, I'll meet you back here and show you how to start row 7. I just finished my last stitch of row 6 and I'm ready to move on to row 7. To do that, we're going to yarn over and chain up 1 and turn our work. For row 7, we're just going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch across. We will not have any changes in our stitch count, so we'll still have 42 single crochets at the end of this row. If you'd like to pause your video and work 1 single crochet into each stitch across, I'll meet you at the end of the row to show you how to move on to row 8. I just finished my last stitch of row 7 and ready to move on to row 8. To do that, we're going to yarn over and chain up 1 and turn our work. To start row 8, we're going to place 1 single crochet into each of the first 3 stitches. Now that we have our 3 single crochets, we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. And now we have a pattern repeat that we're going to repeat across our row a total of 5 times. And that repeat is 1 single crochet into each of the first 6 stitches, followed by an increase. So we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the first 6 stitches. There's 3 and 6. And then we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. And that's our first pattern repeat. We're going to need to do this now 4 more times. So again, 1 single crochet into each of the first 6 stitches. And an increase into the next. So if you'd like to pause your video and do that 3 more times, and again, that repeat is 6 single crochets followed by an increase, I'll meet you back here to show you what we're going to be doing with the last 3 stitches of the row. So I just finished my 5th pattern repeat of the 6 single crochets followed by an increase, and now I have 3 stitches left to be worked in this row. To finish this row, we're going to place 1 single crochet into each of those last 3 stitches. So now that we are done our last stitch of row 8, we're ready to move on to row 9. To do that, we're going to chain up 6 and turn our work. So we're going to yarn over and pull through the loop. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we have our chain 6 and we're going to turn our work. And now we're ready to start our stitching for row 9. So we're going to skip these first 6 chains and we're going to begin working in the last stitch of the previous row. And we're going to place 1 single crochet into that stitch. And now what we've done by skipping those chains is we've created our second buttonhole for the back of our dress. For the remainder of row 9, we're just going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch across. At the end of this row, you should have 48 single crochet stitches and your chain 6 space buttonhole. So if you'd like to pause your video and meet me back here at the end of the row, I'll show you in just a moment here how to move on to row 10. So I just finished my last stitch of row 9 and I'm ready to move on to row 10. For rows 10 through 19, they're all worked in the same way. You're going to start with a chaining up of 1 and turning your work. And then you're going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch across. So if you'd like to pause your video and do rows 10 through 19, working 1 single crochet into each stitch across, and then making sure that you chain 1 and turn before you move on to your next row. I'll meet you back here in just a few minutes to show you how to move on to row 20. So I just finished my last stitch of row 19 and I'm ready to move on to row 20. For row 20, we're going to chain up 1 and turn our work. And just like in the previous rows we just completed, we're going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch across. But at the end of this row, we're going to do something a little different. So if you'd like to just pause your video and work 1 single crochet into each stitch across, meet me back here when you've just finished your last stitch and I'll show you what we're going to be doing at the end of this row that's different than our previous rows. So I just finished my last stitch of row 20, and before I move on, I'm going to be joining my last stitch to my first stitch of this row with a slip stitch. And now the next instructions that we're going to need to be doing is we're going to need to change colors. I personally like to change colors in the slip stitch because it can be a little cleaner. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to insert our hook into the first stitch of the row. So we're going to bring in our secondary color, and for me that is the color gray, and I have a slip knot on my yarn already, and I'm just going to put that onto my hook. I like to do that because it's a little more secure on the camera for me. It's not going to fall out while we're talking or working. If you don't want to deal with that knot, you can just lay the yarn over the hook and doing a yarn over, and you don't have to have that knot there. So now that I've got the second color on my hook, I'm going to pull that through the first stitch and then through to the second. And that is our piece now joined. Now I'm going to pull on the first color here to help pull that tight. And we're ready to proceed on with our new color. So now that we have our new color involved, we're going to yarn over and chain up 1. And we're going to turn our work. Now at this point, this is where I like to bring in my stitch marker, and I like to mark the last stitch of the previous row. So that way I don't pick up or lose stitches. Once we start joining with this slip stitch here, it can get a little confusing as to where your first and last stitches are. And I find that having that stitch marker there just helps me keep track of it. So for rows 21 through 23, we're going to work them all the same. We're going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch across. And at the end of the row, we're going to join with a slip stitch. So I just kind of crocheting over my tails for the first few stitches here, just so that way they don't go anywhere on me. And we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So if you'd like to pause your video, I'll meet you at the end of row 21 and show you again how to join your rows together. And then we'll move on to rows 22 and 23. So again, pause your video and do 1 single crochet into each stitch around. I'll meet you here at the end of the row. So I just finished my last stitch of the row for row 21, and I'm going to slip stitch my first stitch and my last stitch together. So I'm going to insert my hook into that first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then I'm going to pull that loop through the loop on my hook, and there's my slip stitch completed. Now I'm going to chain up 1 and turn my work. And as I mentioned before, I'm just going to put that this stitch marker in the last stitch there so I don't lose or pick up any extra stitches. So for rows 21 through 23, we're going to do it the same way we did row 21. We're just going to crochet 1 single crochet into each stitch across, and then we'll join with a slip stitch at the end of the row. So if you'd like to pause your video and do those 2 rows, I will meet you back here at the end to show you how we're going to finish off our dress. So I just finished my last stitch of row 23 and I'm ready to finish off on my dress here. So I'm just going to cut my yarn, and I'm going to leave a tail of at least 5 to 6 inches. So I have some yarn to weave in my ends here. And then I'm just going to pull that yarn all the way through my last slip stitch and pull it tight. And now I can weave in those ends with my tapestry needle, and I'm ready to move on to the next step. To finish off your dress, you're going to need your 2 9mm buttons, and you're just going to place those buttons on the right side of the dress. So the right side, you can tell, has these little V's on the top instead of what looks like almost like little X's on the back. So your buttonholes should be on the right side of your dress. And you're going to place your buttons on the opposite sides to your buttonholes. You'll use your sewing needle and thread to sew them in place. And then once you're done, you can secure this onto the back using the buttonholes and the buttons on the back of the dress. And that is our little Christmas dress. And now we're ready to move on to create our shawl to go with our Christmas doll dress. To do that, we're going to need our main color again. I'm going to be bringing back my blue here. And we're going to need our same crochet hook. We're using the 3.5 millimeter hook here. We're going to start again with a slip knot. So we've already covered that, so I'm just going to do this quickly. And we're going to start our shawl with a chain of 37. So we're going to yarn over, hook, and pull through the loop. There's 1. Yarn over, pull through, there's 2. And we're going to do this until we have 37 chains. So now that we have our 37 chains, we're going to begin with row 1. So we're going to start in the second chain from the hook. So again, we don't count the yarn on our hook. We're going to count from this chain here over. So we're going to go 1 and 2. And in that second chain, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2. And that's your first single crochet. And now you're going to work 1 single crochet into each remaining chain across. At the end of this row, you should have 36 single crochets. So if you'd like to pause your video and work 1 single crochet into each chain across, I'll meet you back here at the end of row 1 to show you what we'll be doing next. So I just finished my last stitch of row 1 and I'm ready to move on to row 2. I have 36 single crochets, and for rows 2 through 6, they're all going to be worked in the same manner. So we're going to start our rows by yarning over and chaining up 1 and turning our work. And as I said, for rows 2 through 6, they're all done the same way. We're going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch across. So if you'd like to pause your video and do rows 2 through 6 in doing 1 single crochet into each stitch across, I'll meet you back here when you're doing your last stitch of row 6, because we're going to be changing colors to move on to adding our trim to our shawl. So I'll meet you back here at the end of row 6. So I'm at the end of row 6 of my shawl for my Christmas dress, and I have 1 stitch left to be worked. But I need to change colors before I move on to my trim. So I'm going to change colors in using my last stitch of row 6. So I'm going to show you how to change your colors here. So we're going to insert our hook into that next stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop, just like we're going to single crochet. But instead of finishing off my stitch with the blue, I'm going to bring in my second color, which for me is the gray. You're going to yarn over, hook, and again, I'm using that slip knot to help keep it secure for me here. And we're going to pull that new color using the last yarn over here through the last 2 loops on our hook. And we're going to complete our single crochet with the new color. Now we're ready to move on to adding our trim. We're not going to be using the blue yarn again for this, so we can just cut that main color and set it off to the side. We're going to just be using this secondary color moving forward. So now we are chaining up 1 and turning our work. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be crocheting around our piece. Sorry, I'm going to show you that turn one more time because I wasn't doing that mindfully here. So I've got my new color and I'm turning my work, because we want to have the right side of the work facing us for this next step. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to work across the top of our piece, and I'm going to crochet over my yarn tails here to keep them out of the way and to minimize how many ends I need to weave in. So I'm just going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch across. Now, when we get to the end of the piece here, I'm going to show you how we're going to turn our piece to work around the other sides of the piece. So if you'd like to pause your video, work 1 single crochet into each stitch across. I'll meet you back here when we get to the corner or the last stitch of the row. So I have 1 stitch left to be worked in the row here. And now, because I'm at the corner, I want to crochet enough stitches into this last stitch to help me turn my piece so I can work across the short row. So to do that, I'm going to work 3 single crochets into this last stitch here. And this will help me to turn my corner. All right, so I've got 3 single crochets in that last stitch, and now I'm ready to work across the short row of my piece, or short side, I should say, short side of my piece, not the row. And now we're just going to place 1 single crochet into each of the ends of the rows down. So we've got, if you stretch your piece apart, you can kind of see that there's that little gap where the stitch is. I hope you can see that here, right here. You're just going to insert your hook there and single crochet. There's no exact art to this. Just, try to keep them as evenly spaced as possible. And now I'm here at my next corner. So now that I'm at my next corner, I'm going to work 3 single crochets into that corner here. So I find it easier to work into the back loop of the chain here, but if you want to, you can actually push into the stitch if you find that helps you be more secure. So again, we're just 3 single crochets into that last stitch. And now we've turned our piece and we're working along the bottom side of our piece, or the underside of our foundation chain. So you should have these loops left over from your chain, and that's where you're going to work into. You're just going to work 1 single crochet. Sorry, my tail's in the way here. Just going to work 1 single crochet into each of those chains across. Again, if you find it easier, you can actually push your hook into the center of the stitch if you find that that's more helpful or easier for you to see. But I'm just going to crochet 1 single crochet into each stitch across. Now when we get to the corner, we're going to work 3 single crochets into that corner again. So if you'd like to pause your video, I'll meet you back here when you get to the corner, and I'll show you how to do that again. So now I have 1 more stitch left to work in this row, and that's my corner. And I'm going to insert my hook there and place 3 single crochets into that last stitch there. And again, that helps us to create a corner and turn our work. So we are working along the short side of our piece again. And again, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into the ends of each of the rows back to where we started. Now, when we started, we placed 1 single crochet into that corner, but we need that corner to be even with the other 2. So we're going to actually work 2 single crochets into that last corner. So that way we'll eventually just have 3 because we already worked the 1. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, and 3 into that last stitch. And then we're going to join our last stitch into our first stitch with a slip stitch. So we're going to insert our hook into this first stitch here, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through the loop on our hook. And then we can move on to row 2. So we're going to chain up 1, but we're not going to turn our work. We want to do rows 2 and 3 with our front side of our fabric facing. So this is what the front side of the fabric should look like. If you see your stitches looking like this, especially along the color change here, then you know you're on the wrong side of the fabric. This is the right side of the fabric that we want showing. So now we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch across and place 3 single crochets into each corner. So we've already got 1 stitch here. This is technically our corner. So we'll work 2 in that last corner when we come around. But now that we're past our corner, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch across. We'll work 1 stitch into each of the edges along the sides. And again, when we get to our corners, we're going to work 3 single crochets into each of those corners. And rows 2 and 3 are both worked in the same way. So you can either pause your video here and do rows 2 and 3, or you can follow me along here. I'll come back to you every time I get to a corner, and we'll walk through what we're going to do when we get to each corner. So I'm at the end of my row, and I can see that I'm in my previous row here. This is where I worked those 3 stitches into the same stitch. Where I want to place my corner is in the center stitch of those 3. So I'm going to single crochet into the first stitch here. And then now my next stitch is the center of those 3 stitches. And that's where I'm going to work those 3 single crochets. Oops. Those 3 single crochets in order to create my corner again and turn my piece. And again, now we're back onto the short side of the fabric. So we're just going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch down the side here. Again, here is my next corner. I see I have the 3 stitches in that same stitch, but I again want to work those 3 stitches in the center stitch of those 3 stitches I placed there. So I'm going to single crochet into the first stitch and then place 3 single crochets into the next. And now I'm working along the long side of my piece again. And now we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch across until we get to the next corner. So I'm back at my corner here. I have my 3 stitches in the next stitch. I'm going to single crochet in the first stitch, place 3 single crochets into the next stitch, which is our center stitch, to create our corner. So now that we've turned our piece and we're crocheted up the side here, we have a very clear corner piece here, which is our last single crochet. And we're just going to work 3 single crochets into our last stitch. I like to go kind of over the slip stitch a little bit just to hide that slip stitch. And then I'm going to slip stitch my last stitch into my first stitch here to join. And then I'm ready to move on to my next row, which is row 3. I'm going to chain up 1, and I'm going to repeat what we did in row 2. Now in the corner, the one that we just did here, it can be a little tricky in rows 2 and 3 to find that corner stitch. So if you do find it easier to keep track of, just place a stitch marker into the center stitch so you can easily find that corner as you're working. So I invite you to pause your video and do this last row of our trim, round 3, the same way that we did with round 2. And at the end of round 3, you can finish off and weave in your ends. Then we'll meet back here after you're done that to show you how to attach our pom-poms to our shawl to add a closure for it. Okay, so I'll meet you back here in just a few minutes. So we have our finished shawl, and we're just going to set that aside so we can do our pom-poms for our closure. So we're going to be doing our pom-poms in our secondary color, which is the same color we use for a trim. And we're going to need a pom-pom maker. You can also use a piece of cardboard if that's what you've got. You can even use a fork. But I have a bunch of these, so I'm going to use them because I find them a little quicker personally. So if you haven't used a pom-pom maker before, they come apart. They're in 2 pieces like this. And they have these arms that open up. So we're going to grab the tail end of our yarn and we're going to start wrapping around one side. You're going to have to hold the tail down to get it started. And I like to wrap around the tail a couple of times to help secure it before I move on to filling it in. So you're just going to wrap around and fill it in as full as you can. The fuller it is, the fuller your pom-pom is. If you don't fill it up, you might have a sparse looking pom-pom, and we don't want that. Everybody likes a nice, full, fluffy pom-pom. So I'm just going to keep wrapping around. So I have finished wrapping my pom-pom here on this one side, and I think this looks good. So I'm going to close the arms, and I'm going to take this tail, and I like to just put it between the two arms here, so that way I can easily transfer it over to the second set of arms, because we're going to need to wrap those as well. So I'm going to come in between the two arms here. Make sure your arms are held flush together, and then I'm just going to start wrapping those as well. So I have filled the other side of my pom-pom maker, and I'm going to close the second set of arms here. Now I'm just going to cut my yarn and set this aside. So I'm going to cut myself a length of yarn, probably about 15 inches long. You can do anywhere between 13 and 15 inches. I personally think is a good length here. And then I'm going to cut the yarn. Okay, so I want to have 15 to 20 inches doubled, right? So because I want to be able to tie my pom-pom secured in the center. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. So we want to have at least 15 to 20 inches of our length of yarn, but we want it to be doubled. Okay. So I'm going to set that aside. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to grab our scissors and we're going to cut along the lines of the pom-pom here, or the pom-pom maker. If you find that your arms are the arms of your pom-pom maker are moving, you're going to have to keep your thumb on it or find a way to secure it so that way it does not open up on you. Because once you start cutting, if this opens up on you, you're going to have a big mess on your hands there. All right, so I've got one side all trimmed up, and then we're going to flip it over and repeat it on the other side. Okay, there we go. So we've got both sides trimmed. Then we're going to take that length of yarn that we cut, and we're going to put it down the center of our pom-pom maker and pull it all the way through. I like to hold the pom-pom maker and then pull the tails of the yarn, so that way I know it is secure against the center of the pom-pom in there. And now I'm going to tie a series of knots. We want to tie this as tightly as we can without breaking our yarn. Especially because this is going to be given to a child, we don't want the pom-pom to fall apart. So what I like to do is I've done 2 knots now. I'm going to flip the pom-pom over, pull the yarn tails to the opposite side of the pom-pom, and then I'm going to tie 2 more knots on this side. And again, you want to do these as tightly as possible, so that way they're up nice and tight against the core of the pom-pom there. And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do it on the side of the pom-pom. So when I was taught how to make pom-poms, the teacher that had taught me how to do it told me to think of it like a compass. You want to do a series of knots at north, south, east, and west. Right? So if you look at the top of your pom-pom and you imagine that there's a compass on top, you'd say you want a knot at north, south, east, and west. So all the sides of your pom-pom to help keep it secure. And I recently made a series of pom-poms for a family member for their son. And he's now had the pom-poms for, I don't know, I say recently, but I guess now that I think a bit about it, it was probably over a year and a half ago that I made them all these pom-poms, and he plays with them every day and he still hasn't had any of them fall apart. So it's definitely worth the extra time to add the extra knots. So now that I'm happy with all of my knots, I've got knots at all 4 compass points, I'm ready to release my pom-pom from its holder. And so I'm just going to open these arms up here. If you have the odd string like this, don't worry, you're going to trim these up. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, my pom-pom is going to look bigger because I'm using a slightly bigger pom-pom maker than I did in my original sample, because my daughter has lost it on me here. So if your pom-pom isn't perfect, don't worry, because we're going to grab a pair of scissors and you're just going to trim them up. It doesn't have to be perfect, just do your best. And just work around the pom-pom to try and even up the edges as best that you can. So I'm going to trim my pom-pom up, and if you want to pause your video, I'll meet you back here in just a moment and I'll show you how to secure this to your Christmas shawl. So now that I have my pom-pom mostly trimmed up, I'm ready to attach it to my shawl. I have my tails here are a little uneven. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my yarn tails to make sure that they're even. And I'm going to keep both of them instead of just one, because it just feels a little bit more secure by using both tails instead of just one to attach it to the shawl. So I'm going to bring in my shawl. I've got my pom-pom here, and I'm going to take one of these strands here and thread it onto my tapestry needle. Now I'm going to pick one of the corners on the long end and go into the corner stitch here and just pull that yarn through. Now I'm going to take the other end and I'm going to put it through the same stitch, but I'm going to go through the opposite side here, like the opposite way. So I went in from the bottom to the top the first time, and now I'm going to go through the top to the bottom. You don't have to do it this way. This is just my personal preference. And I'm going to leave, let's see, I'm going to pull these both at the same time. And I'm going to leave probably about 6 to 8 inches there of tail here, because I want it to be able to be tied. Okay, so I hope you can see that. We've got 6 to 8 inches here attached to the pom-pom, and then we've got the tails up here coming through opposite sides at the corner of the shawl. So now I like to make sure that both of the sides are even. So give me 1 second, because I look like I split my yarn here. There we go. So I want to make sure that these are both tight, that they're not, there's no loosey-goosey action here happening. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie a small knot here at the top. You don't have to do this. If you would like, you can just go ahead and skip right to weaving in your ends. But since, again, I'm giving this to a child, I feel a little bit better knowing that it is a little more secure with that knot. So now that I have it knotted, I'm just going to thread each of the ends here and weave them into my project. I like to take both tails, now that they've been knotted, pull them to the back of the project. There we go. Pull the other one. There we go. And then I'm just going to turn my project over and weave the ends in through the project. So there we go. We have one of the pom-poms attached to the corner of the shawl. Now you'll need to make a second pom-pom, and then once you've done all of the steps that we did to create our pom-pom, including our tail, you're then going to attach the second pom-pom to the opposite corner. So you want to have them on opposite corners on the long side of the shawl. Okay. And now, once you've done that, you can put your shawl onto your doll, and I'll show you that with my finished sample over here. So here is our doll. Let me move that for us there. So here is our doll, and then we've got our shawl, and just wrap it around her shoulders like so. And then you can just secure it like so. And I have have enough yarn left here for me to even tie a little bow if she's going to be wearing it for a little longer. So that's it. I hope that you enjoyed making your crochet Christmas doll dress and shawl. And thank you so much for joining us along with us for the Amigurumi Advent Calendar Crochet Along. Again, if you'd like to join us for next year's Crochet Along, don't forget to join my newsletter so that way you can be kept up to date as to when the new project will be starting and when project and material lists will be posted as well. Now, if you are interested in winning some great prize packs, I have 2 prize packs that I'm giving away over on my blog, theloopylamb.com, and you can find the entry form for that over on the written pattern page for this pattern on my blog. And I'll link to that in the description box below. What I'm giving away is 2 different prize packs that have full packages of Brava Minis, which has 24 mini balls of yarn, as well as a set of crochet hooks from We Crochet. So you can find a picture of everything that you can win in the prize packs over on the page. So head on down to the description box below, click on the link to find this, the page for the written pattern for this, and you'll scroll to the bottom and you'll find the entry form and full giveaway rules and details. So I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit that like button and please consider subscribing to this channel for free weekly content. If you like free crochet patterns, please check out my blog, theloopylamb.com. Thank you so much for watching, friends. Happy hooking, and I'll see you next time.